Welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. My name is Ty Hildebrand, that guy over there. Dan Rubenstein. Dan, today we are going to do our haphazard, last second, because we have to, preview of the Big Ten Football Conference.
Yes.
Of course, starting play this weekend, October the 24th. We have some big games on the slate. We've got more next week. We got to talk about the East and the West and what it all means in context, Dan.
We do.
You've got the West. I've got the East. Where shall we start?
Let's start West. Let's start with one of the teams that's in the state I'm literally in right now, the Fighting Illini of Illinois. The drive to 5 or 4. I don't know. Whatever makes you happy, Ty.
The thing is, it doesn't really matter this year because of bowl eligibility requirements being relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to find a way to win the crowd.
Yeah.
You need to find a way to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how you get into a bowl game, right?
Let's just go over what intrigues us about each of these teams. And with Illinois, I'm going to say it's the furries, Ty. You might be asking yourself, what furries does Dan speak of? The transfurries, Ty. The transfurries. A lot of guys transfer into this program from a bunch of schools. Somebody I'm particularly interested in, let's hope he's not injured by the time people watch this, but Luke Ford. The Georgia transfer, blue chip transfer from Illinois, transferred back home. I'm interested to see, because they've succeeded so well with pass catchers coming in, especially from USC last year. We saw some big plays. So there's the Imatorbhebhe family has a big presence at Illinois. And what does that mean for Brandon Peters? Because I do believe the defense, even though they've lost a couple of guys up front, and I think they're just going to be solid once again. It's the offense that worries me. And is that talent, those transfers in, is that talent enough, those guys who have transferred in, enough to make Brandon Peters interesting? I think it's intriguing because at times he made plays last year, but that was just it, at times. That to me is interesting and intriguing about Illinois, has the talent level increased enough to the point where playing in the Big Ten West, they can make more noise than just be shock of the world Illinois. Like they're just consistently interesting.
Okay. No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And of course, the Illini square off against another West opponent in week 1 of the Big Ten slate. That is the Wisconsin Badgers.
Badgers.
How do you feel about the Badgers this year?
I think good. Wisconsin's one of those teams that it's very difficult to see a complete dramatic change in either direction. And because their ceiling seems to be so high, just not quite as high as I'm sure they would like it to be. Jack Cohn is injured and out for a considerable amount of time. And so my big intriguing thought question is, I guess it's more hope. Where are those winter wonders, Ty? We've seen it almost year in, year out that they'll win the West, they'll get to the championship game and inevitably play against Ohio State, most likely. Maybe go to the Rose Bowl and take on Oregon like they did last year. Who are those guys that those top-tier teams across the country or within the conference itself, who are they scared of? Who are those receivers that teams have to game plan for? We know Jonathan Taylor's gone, and we know that he was somebody you had to know, usually he's in the backfield, but you had to be extremely concerned about him touching the ball every time. Who are those guys this year? Looks like it's a running back by committee. We have Kendrick Pryor. They lose Quintez Cephas to the NFL. Who is that guy or group of guys for Wisconsin who you're like, oh, crap, he's lined up in the slot. Oh, no, he's lined up outside. Oh, my goodness, he's in motion. I'm worried about where those winter wonders are, those guys who can perform in December and January against anybody.
The other thing with Wisconsin, you didn't mention the name Graham Mertz.
That's true. Yeah, you mentioned Jack Cohn out. Yeah.
Graham Mertz is a highly touted quarterback recruit.
Does he fall under that for you? Is he a winter wonder?
He could be. We don't know enough about him.
Right.
And I'm very curious to see what he can give them. I think Jack Cohn, for his part last year, was better than I expected. But still, there was much room to grow in that offense. And if you can add in a guy with a little bit more arm talent, a little bit more consistency, obviously that improves the quality of that rushing attack for Wisconsin. Hard to do more of that.
Yeah.
But it makes them all the more threatening as an opponent if you've got some sort of capable passing game to go along with it.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, very intrigued in which direction things go at the quarterback position for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I like Jack Cohn. I like Graham Mertz. Hopefully he gives them a bit of a higher ceiling. Is there a team to you? Let's tie it to Wisconsin, Ty. Is there a team to you in the East where you like, but your intrigue is about their ceiling?
Well, I mean, I think I'll say Indiana.
Oh, okay. Go on.
I'm intrigued by Indiana's ceiling insofar as I think they have really been trying to push up against that upper crust of the East for a few years now. They've been knocking at the door to knock off an Ohio State or a Penn State or a Michigan State with any kind of consistency.
Right.
And I think this might be the year where they finally get to that height. I'm not saying they're going to win the East. But
go on.
I think they've got enough consistency across the board, enough depth finally across the board where that actually becomes a real possibility. Michael Penix was hurt last year. He's back this year.
Is that your intrigue point? Big lefty?
He is my intrigue point.
Okay.
Because I think the ceiling with Penix is probably higher than it was with Ramsey. And we just didn't see enough of him. So you combine that with Stevie Scott, who we obviously like on the show and have talked a lot about. I think they're good at receiver. Questions about the line, but the defense was young a year ago. It should show some improvement again this season.
Ty, we were all so young a year ago.
We were.
Oh, we were young.
But hey, had their offensive coordinator depart, but promoted from within. So I just think that continuity, especially in a weird year like this where teams are learning new systems, they have new coaches and new players, it really helps to have a core of guys who just kind of get what your program's all about. And so that's part of the reason why, especially in a week one game against a Penn State, I find Indiana particularly intriguing. And especially moving forward, right? Moving forward into a 2021 slate, I do think Tom Allen is building something at Indiana. And for that reason, they're more intriguing to me than probably most others.
Probably not 9-Windiana when you only have 8 regular season games, but the 9-Windiana spirit lives on.
It's there.
Yeah.
It does live on.
All right.
Absolutely.
Any other team where so let's take it back to how I felt about Illinois, where I'm interested to see how they go from being scrappy to competent. Weekly competence. Is there a team that weekly competence is an intrigue point for you within the Big Ten East?
I'll just say Rutgers, Dan.
Okay, good answer.
I'm going to say Rutgers.
Good answer.
Yeah, Rutgers is intriguing. So Greg Schiano's back.
Yeah.
He's been there before. I'm not saying there's going to be some sort of overnight transition.
But they've got furries too.
They do. They did a lot of work. I'm still not comfortable saying that. But
you're not.
Schiano wasn't the sexy hire, but he knows the turf. He knows how to recruit to Rutgers.
Sure.
He obviously did some work on the transfer portal. The offense is going to be a work in progress. They've got 1 million quarterbacks on the roster that they're still trying to sift through. As of recording, it looks like it's going to be King Arthur Sikowski, the week one starter, but that could change depending on how Schiano feels. I am most curious about their defense. I think their defense can be cobbled together in a way that they got enough parts to be competitive out there, to offer enough resistance. And hey, at a minimum, be better than Maryland. Everybody's got to be better than Maryland this year.
Yeah.
And that would represent, I think, a pretty big step forward for Rutgers. So if you're talking week to week, who's gonna be intriguing just from a competent standpoint, I'm curious to see what Schiano can do in year one.
Yeah, I mean, the transfers are huge. And yeah, the week-to-week competence thing, I think the Greg Schiano hire is not a year one hire. That is we are investing these next 5 years into hoping that what he did before can become not necessarily a reality, but in the realm of reality. New Jersey's a talented state. PA, New Jersey, parts of New York, Connecticut, there's talent in the Northeast. Rutgers is just a very unsexy place. And we'll see if the Scarlet Knights can sex it up, Ty.
So let me build on that.
Okay, please.
As you talk about unsexy places.
Oh, no.
You got a couple of those in the Big Ten West, don't you?
Yeah, I guess, but be more specific. What type of unsex do you want?
I'm talking about the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Okay.
Man. The Iowa Hawkeyes, as we've talked about on our show time and again, kind of feels vanilla, kind of feels the same every year. They've got some of their own challenges in 2020.
Sure.
They've obviously had a lot going on off the field here. Where do we stand on where Kirk Ferentz takes things?
Explosivo. That's my word, Ty. I don't know if you're familiar.
Explosivo?
Explosivo. Are you familiar with the band Tenacious D?
I am, yes.
Tenacious D. It's a song by Tenacious D. They just say Explosivo a bunch.
Right.
And it weirdly, I kept saying that, looking at Iowa and the potential for 2020. Iowa finished something like 95th and 96th in explosive plays on the ground and through the air with an experienced quarterback, with relatively developed skill players, a good offensive line. Tristan Wirfs obviously was the headliner, got drafted pretty early. And their ability to generate, or their desire to generate, explosive plays, something that's key in generating and stopping, which Iowa was fantastic on defense at doing. But that to me is the intrigue point. Spencer Petras this year is the new quarterback, a big kid from California, and big arm, whatever. But is that offense opening up at all? Wisconsin, for all of their identity, how solidly into Madison Wisconsin's offensive identity is, they've gotten creative. They've run RPOs. They've run misdirection. They've spread the ball around. Iowa has not. Iowa has decidedly not. And is there any sort of evolution of this offense? I know they lose key guys on defense on all levels, but to me, I'm not worried about their defense. It's offensively. What can they do to put a scare into teams that basically all kept Iowa under 30 points last year? They didn't score a touchdown in their first 7 quarters in October last year against Michigan and Penn State. If you're an Iowa fan watching this, go back to how you felt during those 7 quarters in which your very experienced quarterback, Nate Stanley, was unable, and we knew his ability was there, to lead Iowa to the end zone. Those types of streaks can't happen anymore, Ty, if Iowa's going to win this division.
No, it's true.
That's the intrigue point. How are they getting the ball downfield quicker?
Iowa, for a long time, has challenged for the Big Ten West.
Sure.
This year, I think you could make a very real case for Minnesota. Minnesota is a veteran team, maybe not so much on defense, but they've obviously got a huge week 1 matchup at home against Michigan. Are you buying in on the Gophers? Where's your intrigue point there?
Linebackers and defense in general, just because they were so disruptive in that back 7. And the corners are in pretty good shape. I know they're replacing safeties, including Antoine Winfield, but their linebackers were so disruptive and so havoc-y because they return what they return on offense. Even with the new offensive coordinator, I'm not terribly worried about the Gopher offense. What it is to me is the defense. What it is to me is what they look like in that first half against Penn State. Do they have that same ceiling this year, as this has to be their year with Tanner Morgan as a senior? This has to be their year with what they return on offense, and it can be, but I think it largely is going to come down to how well and how deep they are at linebacker and safety. And that to me is the big intrigue point, is what does Minnesota do to build upon and not just start out 7-0 and lose a couple late to, Iowa or whoever, Wisconsin. What do they look like in terms of getting over that November hump? That to me, or December hump as it were this year, that to me is fascinating about Minnesota.
Yeah, and as I said, Minnesota's week 1 opponent is Michigan, who is intriguing on a number of different fronts for me. We've been in this very weird kind of whipsaw state with Jim Harbaugh, where from year to year, we expect different things. Now, expectations are always high at Michigan. Last year was supposed to be the year that if they were going to pull off that win over Ohio State, it was going to happen. Well, it didn't.
Right.
And so now we're in this COVID era where there's a lot of turnover. We've got Dylan McCaffrey sitting out. We've got an entire offensive line that needs to be rebooted. We've got more turnover than usual on the defensive side of the ball. I love Big Joe Milton. 6'5.5", 230, a mountain of a man. He's huge.
Has all the throws. Yeah.
He can really spin it, Dan. Right?
Yeah.
But my intrigue point with Michigan is how much they can rebuild, retool, whatever very quickly in a weird pandemic state, get themselves together in time for what should still be a pretty significantly difficult Big Ten East slate of games here. I have my doubts against Minnesota. I have my doubts against some of the others on their side of the conference as well. And it's probably not fair to burden Jim Harbaugh with unrealistic expectations in this year 2020 season, just because I do feel like Michigan's in a much different spot than we've seen them over the last 5 years or so.
I would imagine Jim Harbaugh's expectations are higher than yours and mine.
I'm sure they are. Absolutely.
So, yeah, that to me feels right enough. The intrigue point is Joe Milton. The intrigue point is Joe Milton, even though the Michigan defense has struggled in those games, last year against Wisconsin, the past couple years against Ohio State. Excellence at quarterback has escaped the Jim Harbaugh era at Michigan. I know the last 2/3 of the Jake Rudock season were interesting. Interesting doesn't beat Ohio State. It just doesn't. Excellence at quarterback beats Ohio State and covers for other issues. That, to me, is the intrigue point for Michigan.
And look, I like Zach Charbonnet. I think he was great last year.
Sure.
I like Sean Haskins. I think he's solid as well.
Sean Haskins, real nice.
It helps to have that running game that you could lean on, but without the line, with a new quarterback, there's just too many variables on that offense to really feel great about it. And again, as I said, I trust the defense generally over the course of a season, but there is a little bit more turnover there than I think we're used to. So
can we move
Michigan's
to
an intriguing
another
case for me?
Okay. Can we move to another beleaguered head coach?
Please.
Scott Frost. Let's talk.
Scotty too hotty.
My hope for Nebraska is entertainment on one side of the ball, like we saw glimpses of now a couple of years ago. So I don't like looking too far into the past. My intrigue point is, if Adrian Martinez is healthy, who is he throwing to? We know about Wan'Dale Robinson. They lose J.D. Spielman. He transfers out kind of late in the process. He goes to, I think, TCU.
Right.
Who's catching Adrian Martinez passes? They have a JC guy I know they like a lot. They've got a couple of recruits. I mean, not recruits, but freshmen, younger players that they like a lot. But Nebraska's first step towards competitiveness-ish in the Big Ten West. I have to add a lot of ishes to discussion of Nebraska football. They have to be entertaining on offense. They have to be a threat on offense. And I watched good Scott Frost offenses at Oregon. We all watched good Scott Frost offenses at UCF. The defense is going to be pushed around once again. I like their secondary a little bit, actually. But up front, they're going to be pushed around a little bit, and that happens. They're going to allow points. They can't lose like they did to Minnesota. They can't lose like they did to Ohio State. And even if it's losing by 20 instead of 30, that's something. That's something forward. Give me a half of competitive football. Give me down at halftime 24-20. Yes, you've given up 24 points, but you're kind of right there. That's my entry point for Nebraska is make the scoreboard ops work a little bit, please. Just please.
I am intrigued by Nebraska as well, and not even so much within the context of this season. Okay. They got a brutal Big Ten slate in front of them this year.
They scored 13 points against Northwestern last year.
I know. And then they spoke up after some of the COVID decisions by the conference.
Yeah.
Time will probably tell us whether or not this scheduling situation was intentional.
Right.
But they did draw a very tough slate. It will not make Scott Frost's life any easier. I do think that he is the right guy for the job. I really do. I think if you're Nebraska, you're not going to do much better than Scott Frost. So I think you give him time. I hope they're patient.
You don't think Nebraska did better with Bo Pelini?
Well, no.
I do. I do.
I think that to build this program back up from where it's been, I think Scott Frost can get them there and will get them there with the benefit of time. I just hope that the patience is there among the powers that be to give him that time to go and build this thing the right way, because I do have a lot of faith in him as a coach. It's just going to take some time to get there.
It seems to me they need to win at least 2, probably 3. I'm looking at their schedule. That's why I'm looking down right now. At Ohio State, Wisconsin, at Northwestern, Penn State, Illinois. If they can go 3-2 at home, if they can sneak by Northwestern, Illinois, and Wisconsin, if Wisconsin's still sort of unsettled early on at quarterback, Graham Mertz isn't comfortable, that's encouraging. That's really, even if they lose big to Ohio State and Penn State, whatever, 3-2 is really, really nice. I don't think it's unreasonable given year 3, 4, 5, whatever it is now, whatever it feels like.
Yeah.
All right. Who do you want to go to? Is there another beleaguered coach? Is there another offense? Is there another offense that needs a spark? Who is it for you?
Well, we didn't talk about Ohio State yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how we can go this deep without talking Ohio State. And the intrigue point for me, I don't have a matchup. I don't have a thing with Ohio State that's like, oh, that's the gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Achilles heel. I am intrigued by style points because keep in mind the setting in which the Big Ten is going to be playing these football games. All the other conferences outside of the Pac-12, obviously, have started up already, have started planting their respective flags. Clemson won a game by, 66 odd points, however many it was.
They did.
And certainly Alabama has a few big wins on its schedule and resume already.
Yeah.
Ohio State needs to come in late to the party and prove itself. So, sure, they've got turnover at some spots in the secondary. Maybe we have questions about it, but I think ultimately there's going to be a pretty strong impetus to score as many points as possible whenever possible. And so I think that means big stats for Justin Fields, as we saw a year ago. I think that means wherever they can possibly rip the arms and legs off you, they're gonna do just that.
Right.
The gap between Ohio State and I think the next closest team and or teams
Minnesota,
in the Big Ten,
Purdue,
is whoever.
Yeah.
It is substantially wider than it was a year ago. And so I just think they're going to run roughshod through the conference. I think they're going to score a ton of points, and I expect to see them not just holding up that Big Ten trophy, but eventually making it into the playoffs and really making a name for themselves.
So your intrigue point is murder potential?
Murder potential. They are college football's murder hornets this year.
Who is the team that they are least likely to murder? Is that Penn State week 2 in an empty Beaver Stadium?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. I have a lot of confidence in Penn State. I think the ceiling is pretty high. I think the floor is pretty high because of their defense and what they've got coming back on offense. Now,
sure.
That being said, my 3 points of concern for Penn State are A, giving up big plays on defense, which is sort of a byproduct of the defense that Brent Pry runs. There's a risk reward element to it where big plays are sometimes a thing that you get. So they need to cut down on that, obviously, if they want to beat a team like an Ohio State. They also lose Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons opting out for 2020. I don't blame the kid. I think they've got enough depth without him to still play a really good brand of defense, but it hurts not to have him out there.
Sure.
So how they replace that gap is of concern, of interest to me. I think they'll be okay, but again, I'm watching that intently. And look, on the offensive side, we know about Journey Brown being out. Medical condition won't be there for 2020. I think they're fine from a depth perspective. What I really care about is the passing game, and especially about Sean Clifford finding targets out wide to throw to. New offensive coordinator, friend, he doesn't know it, but favorite of the Solid Verbal, Kirk Shiraka.
Yeah.
I think his offense is more streamlined. It's more simplified. He will find ways to better utilize a guy like a Pat Freiermuth, but ultimately a lot rides on
a lot of RPO stuff
in
Minnesota for sure.
Absolutely. A lot rides on whether or not Sean Clifford can be better with the football and show up in bigger spots than he did last year. So
yeah, I agree.
Intrigued to see his progression, but I don't think they're going to get murdered by Ohio State.
Yeah, not terribly concerned, but we saw what happened with the Penn State offense last year, especially when they lost Sean Clifford, who was himself not all that good against Ohio State. This is an offense that can go into a shell pretty quickly. So hopefully we don't see that anymore in those big games for Penn State. Let's talk about Purdue. One, because they have given Ohio State some trouble in recent years, Ty. That's right.
They have.
We're talking about the Purdue Boilermakers. And two, we mentioned, winter wonders for Wisconsin. Purdue has those dudes out wide, I think, in Rondale Moore. And, if Rondale Moore can do that against Ohio State during the regular season, I imagine he can do it against somebody later on in the year, perhaps in December or January, if Purdue ever makes it there. Purdue is fascinating to me because what do those two receivers, David Bell and Rondale Moore, what do they do for that offense? This was a Purdue team that was so beset by injuries last year that just crushed their season. I don't love where they are on defense. They've still given up too much, and I don't think health fully solves everything. But what can those two guys on offense do gravitationally for Purdue? What can they do for, I don't know if it's going to be Plummer or Aiden O'Connell, Jack Plummer or Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. What can they do for the running game? What can they do for each other? What can they do for the middle of the field? Because Purdue is another one of those teams that I think they're ahead of Nebraska when healthy, just because of They've proven it on the field. They've proven that they can be competitive. They've proven that they can beat big teams. It's just a week-to-week thing. What does that gravitational consistency look like for that offense? To me, it's fascinating. Purdue, when they are healthy and fully operational and weaponized, they're a great watch. That's the intrigue point.
Weaponized Purdue is not something we've
big
heard
old
a whole
drum.
lot of.
I don't know if the big drum's going to be on the field this year, but they do have a big drum somewhere on that campus.
They do. And I love that Rondale Moore is playing. He opted out initially. He's coming back now. He's one of the more exciting players in college football, and it's cool that we get to see him after a lot of doubt here. I want to talk about Northwestern because I know you're very close to Northwestern University now, just geographically speaking. Mm-hmm. How do we feel about Northwestern? We didn't feel great about them last year. Is there any pulse in that Wildcat program?
That was a really nice thing you just said. We didn't feel great because
we did. They were terrible.
Okay, that's probably more accurate. New offensive coordinator. The intrigue point to me is Peyton Ramsey is a quarterback who I think finished. Was he one of the best? Was he top 5 Big Ten quarterback last year? Which automatically makes him an even higher ranked quarterback in the Big Ten. Tanner Morgan, Justin Fields, Jay Patterson, maybe. I don't know. Like it fell off pretty quickly in the Big Ten. Peyton Ramsey he's an accurate quarterback. I think he completed 65% of his passes against Big Ten teams. He's efficient. Yeah. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes. His ceiling is not particularly high, but what does Northwestern need at quarterback if their defense is okay? Northwestern's down their NFL prospect, Rashawn Slater, left tackle, so that hurts them. What do they have in terms of game changers on offense? It's not going to be a lot. But that's not how they're going to win. The offense is there to be relatively efficient and serve the defense, which is fine. They won the division a couple of years ago. If they get pretty good quarterback play, it feels like they're 40 times better than where they were last year. That to me is intriguing. Yeah. If Peyton Ramsey of 2020 looks like Peyton Ramsey of 2019, I know it's a lot to ask with the issues that have surrounded this Northwestern offense for years, but that is raising the floor considerably from where it's been.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And while we talk about floors, why don't we talk about Maryland?
Okay, let's.
You know how like you see in movies when somebody yells fire and everybody runs out of the movie theater like a stampede?
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of what happened at Maryland this offseason. They had just an incredible number of guys run for the exits. It's not uncommon whenever you've got a new coaching regime taking over. But it was pretty drastic.
Yeah.
And so the intrigue point for me on the Maryland side is not anything to do with wins and losses. But we know Mike Loxley knows the area. We've joked about that, our fantasy things.
Mike Loxley knows the DMV.
He knows the DMV.
Yeah.
And I do think that if given some time, he can build up an interesting roster and move the program forward. It's not going to happen this year. My point of intrigue is at the quarterback position.
Okay.
It's at the quarterback position. Because we've got, on one hand, Lance Lejeune, my favorite Frenchman in all of college football. Don't know if he's French. Certainly sounds that way. He was a 4-star recruit
New Orleans,
for Loxley.
So, okay.
You're right. He was a 4-star recruit in Loxley's first recruiting class. And there is obviously a lot of excitement around him, as well as Talia Tungavailoa.
They have a Tungavailoa. Perhaps
they have
not
a Tungavailoa.
But they do have a, yeah.
Tua, of course, playing for the Miami Dolphins, the younger brother. Talia is now playing with Mike Loxley, who did coach older brother Tua for some period of time before he left Alabama. So right now, at time of recording, it's an either-or situation on the depth chart. It's either Lejeune or Tungavailoa. We'll see who ends up getting more time, but that interplay between those two and how Loxley chooses to deploy each is of particular interest to me.
Okay. They gave up 54 points, 73 points, 38, 52. So, yeah, I think the defense probably has further to go to be very obvious. But, yeah, offensively, there's talent there. There's speed there. There's recent talent and speed there. And so they brought in, a blue-chip receiver, a 5-star receiver this year. It's slowly but surely becoming intriguing. I don't know if it's intriguing this week, next week, and the week after, but there is some intrigue to College Park, I would say.
I would agree. The
Did
last
everybody?
team
Who
that
do you
I
have
here.
Oh man,
The
I
last
just
team that I
disrespected
have,
somebody. Michigan State, maybe.
Michigan State.
Yeah.
So Michigan State's in an incredibly weird situation. Michigan State had their longtime head football coach. 3, 2. Michigan State had their longtime head football coach, Mark D'Antonio, resign abruptly on February the 2nd of this very calendar year. They moved quickly. They probably overpaid a little bit to bring Mel Tucker up from Colorado, but they got their guy.
Going right.
So Mel Tucker takes over in February, tries to get things going as quickly as possible. We talked to their social media director on one of our shows this offseason, but obviously there's this whole pandemic thing on top of it. So on top of the fact that there was a late coaching change, which is always brutal for a program, we now have this very awkward quarantine period where teams just have not been able to get out there and do their thing and learn the new system and mesh together and be one as a team. So that does not bode well for Michigan State, at least in the early going here with regard to what are they going to do on the field? What's the output going to be? That being said, I am very intrigued in this being stylistically a different offense because for a long time,
really, to score points? Is that the new style?
Well, I just think the tempo that I expect to see. Jay Johnson comes along with Mel Tucker from Colorado. Yeah. The results in year one were iffy. Okay,
mixed,
but
at best, yeah.
There is a tempo component to the offense that I think they want to run that we frankly have not seen at Michigan State. So that contrast from what we've seen in years past out of a D'Antonio offense to me is of particular intrigue here. I'm curious to see some of the new faces in new spaces. Certainly Elijah Collins had a great freshman year, almost rushing for 1,000 yards. To now see what they put around him and just the general tenor of that offense to me is pretty interesting.
For a team last year against Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan, they scored 10, 0, 7, and 10 points. I think you're right. The entry point has to be offense just because we can't watch another year of this. It's impossible. We cannot watch another year of Michigan State falling from playoff team, from conference contender, not even just division contender, conference contender. They've won the Big Ten. They forced Urban Meyer to eat crappy Papa John's pizza in a golf cart. To where they've fallen offensively. They're extremely efficient, not always flashy, but extremely efficient at their the early 20 teens or whatever. Yeah. Offense is an intrigue, but if they can just rise to below average and then maintain some semblance of what their defense has been, which has been all pretty impressive considering what the offense hasn't been giving them, that's intriguing. Mel Tucker has a really good defensive reputation. There is talent, but the talent has fallen off at Michigan State. I'm curious to see how well that offense can serve the defense just by staying on the field. Just stay on the field. Yeah. Get a field goal here. Give them rest. Get 3 first downs on a drive and then punt. That to me is the very base level intrigue for Michigan State's offense. Yeah. It's a low bar, Ty.
Did we cover all the teams?
I believe so. Did you cover all of your teams? Do you want to count it out and check it off?
I've got Ohio State,
Penn
State, Michigan, Indiana, Michigan State, Rutgers, and Maryland. I think we covered it.
Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois. We are set. Do you have a Big Ten West runner-up to Ohio State, or perhaps somebody who is going to win the conference that is not Ohio State?
Ohio State's going to win the conference. Okay. Ohio State is far and away the best team in the conference. I still think you got to go Wisconsin.
Okay.
But I'm very intrigued by Minnesota. Minnesota, to me, is that team that if they can get their defense together, there is certainly more than enough firepower on that offense, especially with Rashad Bateman now opting back in.
Yeah.
You've got a highly efficient quarterback in Tanner Morgan, a good running game. There are enough pieces there that I think we can rely on and count on that they are a formidable opponent, formidable challenger to Wisconsin.
My big grower is Purdue. My big faller might be Penn State. It might be Penn State.
I could see it.
I think the lack of obvious weapons, perhaps outside of your boy Baby Gronk on offense, And with Journey Brown now unable to play this year, and defense losing their clear best player, losing a couple pieces up front, Penn State has me worried. Penn State has me worried just because I'm going to need a substantial jump from Sean Clifford to feel really good about them all season long. And I don't know if I see it. That could be my faller.
What I like about Clifford, especially in the new system, is that he brings a little bit more mobility than Tanner Morgan. And, what Shiraka can do with that mobility, and especially having a big tight end, that could be interesting with that offense. Didn't really have that at Minnesota. So definitely a new dimension that he can explore. But I think you're right. You're right to question Penn State. It does hurt to lose Micah Parsons, but I will add that the defense does bring a lot back.
Yeah, they've recruited and developed so well on defense. The road schedule is nice at Nebraska, at Michigan, at Rutgers.
Yeah.
And they obviously open at Indiana, but I'm worried. A little bit worried about that offense.
That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair. I think that's all we got. Don't forget to subscribe to the Solid Verbal.
Yeah.
SolidVerbal.com, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also find us on social media, and we do have a Patreon at verballers.com, Dan. That's all I got.
There. That's all I have too. Verballers.com. Thanks for watching, Ty. I'm very excited to watch Big Ten football.
Let's do it.